Happy New Year, and welcome to the Office of the Patriot. Yeah, I know I'm a little bit late on the Happy New Year greeting, but this is my first episode of 2023, so it is appropriate. If you are a returning viewer or subscriber, welcome back, and thank you for your continued viewership. It is appreciated. If you're a first-time viewer, congratulations on finding my channel. My name is Myron Ybarra, and I'm your host. For the last 3 years, the news cycle, and thus you, have been inundated with news of the Plan-Demic and everything associated with it. To wear a mask or not wear a mask, to get the jab or not, and everything in between. However, today I thought I would focus on some of the issues that are the unintended, or depending on who you talk to, the intended consequences of our government's reaction to the COVID-19 virus. But before I get into this further, I would like to get your take. Do you believe that products and or services provided by businesses in the United States today match pre-pandemic levels of quality and value? Please take the time to comment below. In late 2019, many of us started to hear about this horrific virus that had a very high mortality rate making its way to the United States and all over the world. Not a lot of information was readily available at the time, so our government suggested, out of an abundance of caution, that limiting travel and gatherings was a wise course of action. However, some on the left vilified the Trump administration for this recommendation and some of the early decisions that were made, or that they made, in dealing with the COVID virus, claiming that limiting contact and travel was inhumane, especially with the upcoming holiday season, and it was racist to close our borders to slow the spread of COVID. Later, when COVID started to take hold here in the United States, Democrats united, claiming that they would be unwilling or feel unsafe taking the vaccine that was developed under the Trump administration. But after assuming power in early 2020, they happily pushed and in some cases mandated getting the vaccine. Further, prophylactics such as hydroxychloroquine and later ivermectin that had some early success in treating COVID patients were vilified by leftists as horse dewormers. And shortly after the Biden regime change, these medications were banned for treating COVID. Next came the fear that Americans felt as a result of limited and or contradictory information being passed by the media and our government. The Biden administration and local governments mandated businesses locked down to slow the spread. Later, masking mandates were instituted and vigorously enforced. This fear drove people to hoard essential items like canned goods, baby food, and formula, and the infamous toilet paper fiasco. Yes, one of the first unintended consequences of COVID was an unwiped backside. But there are quite a few more. When COVID mandates were beginning to be lifted, restaurants were some of the first businesses allowed to reopen. However, their reopening was done on a very limited basis. Many restaurants adjusted their hours because they had little to no staff to run them. Some restaurants limited their menus, minimizing options for customers. However, their prices didn't drop, but in many cases rose due to being locked down for months on end. At that time, restaurant owners were put between a rock and a hard place trying to keep the lights on and recover financially. And like many of you, I understood and empathized with those business owners. And as a sympathetic customer, I tried to help them recover as much as I could by patronizing these restaurants, even when some of them took it upon themselves to become mask police. However, we're nearly 3 years past the lockdowns, and as a whole, the level of service and quality I am seeing from many restaurants has not recovered to pre-pandemic levels. Wait times have increased significantly, and menu selections are marginally better than the reopening offerings that happened just 3 short years ago. And this isn't just limited to restaurants. Take a look at hotel service. When hotels were given the green light to open, or rather reopen, services were limited to minimize contact between patrons and hotel staff to slow the spread of COVID. And again, 3 years later, I'm still having to ask for room cleanings 3 days after checking in, and towels for every day of my stay. But costs haven't went down due to reduced services, but instead they've increased. That's pretty nice for the hotels because they got to reduce their staffing costs at the expense of us. And if you think this is just happening at your local Best Western or Motel 6, think again. Many 4- and 5-star luxury hotels are doing the exact same thing, yet they're charging $500 plus per night. What about large purchases such as new cars, electronics, large household appliances, and even new home builds? How many times have you heard that COVID is a cause of supply chain issues or skilled staffing shortages? People who are having cars built are having to wait months and in some cases years to get a car they ordered and paid for. And after receiving the car, many find out that many of the safety or convenience features they paid for could not be installed because of supply chain issues. So they get a meager credit about 10% of what they paid when they ordered that part. And while this isn't much of an issue right now because of the Fed and our overly generous Congress, new home builds all over the nation are taking an average of 50% longer to complete versus pre-pandemic build times, with over double the amount of build quality issues they had pre-pandemic. And I can attest to this unintended consequence personally. Why did all this stuff happen? I mean, with the amount of time our local, state, and federal governments had to address the logistics of bringing the economy back online, we really should have had a very smooth reopening. But let's look at the many protections that were offered to workers moving back into the workforce. 6-foot distance mandates with cute little footprints to tell you where you could stand that were placed all over grocery stores, retail stores, hotel lobbies, and in some cases, hallways and aisles had them, directing the flow of traffic throughout the store. Next, you couldn't be in a public space without some type of face diaper covering your nose and mouth. In some cases, the mandates for a face covering specified the types of coverings that were allowed, like surgical mask or N95 mask, in case you wanted to fly to see your ailing parents or grandparents. Businesses were encouraged and in some cases mandated to ensure employees that returned to the workforce were vaccinated, boosted, and masked while on the job. However, in my opinion, the most significant consequence that I saw was that our government, in its ineptitude in dealing with the COVID-19 virus, cultured and fostered a fear that to this day remains in many Americans. And you can see this everywhere. Just walk into any store. At least one customer will have that face diaper still on. Even knowing that these masks do not prevent the spread of COVID-19 or any virus for that matter. The unfortunate truth is that it is really easy to convince people of something when they are not vested in it and know very little about it. In this case, that they were going to get COVID and die if they didn't have their masks on. But it's near impossible to unconvince somebody of that same fact once they believe in it. Experience is the only thing that will help these people let go of their fear and resume their lives. So, do we accept that this current level of service is the new norm? Or do we force the hand of business owners for offering substandard services and products? For those of you who are living your lives again pre-pandemic, I recommend that as customers, you become more particular about what you're willing to accept in exchange for your dollar. If enough customers let these businesses know that substandard products and services are no longer going to be acceptable, they will be forced to bring back their products or services up to a level where they and we can be proud. Well, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what was presented, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share my channel on your social media. It is appreciated. And as always, have a great day and stay safe out there.